Well, this is how long it took me for each chapter. Yeah, it hasn't been that bad. Under 700 turns, I'm proud of myself.
Seth, the Silver Knight. Seth returned to Renee's with Ephraim and his fellow knights. His dedicated service made him the most trusted of the new King and Queen's guardsmen, as well as the most famous of knights in all of Renee's. Franz the Faithful. He continued to serve Renee's with the same devotion that he had during the War of the Stones. His generous nature and easy smile made him a favorite among the people. Silent Gilliam. Gilliam returned to his home of Frelia, where he continued to serve the crown as a faithful knight. His imposing countenance was said to strike fear in the hearts of even the most arrogant and brash of Frelia's new recruits. Mulder, wise counselor. After the War of the Stones, Mulder continued to serve the royal family of Frelia. His wisdom served to guide King Innes as it had served King Hayden before him. Vanessa, dutiful rider. She remained on active duty as an airborne knight in Frelia's army. Her beauty and determination became the standard to which her fellow knights aspired. Ross, his father's son. He returned to Ide, village of his youth, and helped rebuild it after the bandit attack that brought it to ruin. Years later, he set out on his own to perfect his fighting skill and hone both body and spirit. Ross never died, haha. Garcia, the warrior reborn. He returned to Ide to help with its reconstruction after the bandit attack. Afterward, he re-enlisted in the army, serving Renee's as a troop leader. His strength, valor, and experience inspired many. Colm, good-natured thief, and Neimi, the tearful archer. The childhood friends became lovers first, then husband and wife. Worried for Neimi's well-being, Colm gave up his adventurer's ways. Neimi passed on her grandfather's skill in archery to her own son and daughter. Artur, Saint of Light. Artur moved to Renee's to help rebuild the shattered country. He worked without rest to ease the pain and grief of those who suffered during the war. His self-sacrifice made him into a folk hero among the peasantry. Lute, prodigy. After the War of the Stones, Lute returned to Renee's to continue her arcane studies. She spent far less time locked in her library, preferring now to explore the outside world. She grew into a great and well-traveled sage. Joshua, the Tempest King. Joshua returned to Johanna and ruled over it as king. His skills as a leader had grown great, and Johanna flourished as never before. He never outgrew his love of travel and games of chance. Natasha, sacred healer. Once the war was over, Natasha returned to Grotto to help rebuild the empire. She dedicated herself to easing the grief of those families that lost soldiers during the war. Ford, the Wild Knight. Upon Ford's return to Renee's, his secret hobby of painting was discovered. He was commissioned as a court artist. His work grew popular, and his days became so busy that he often regretted his career change. Kyle, Ardent Knight. His service to the royal family of Renee's continued without change. He became a battalion commander and gained much trust and responsibility for training new recruits. Tana, Winged Queen. Tana lived happily in the prosperous post-war Frelia. She flew to Renee's often to visit her dear friend Erica. Innes, King and Strategician. As time went on, he succeeded his father, Hayden, as King of Frelia. His resourcefulness and tactical prowess helped him build a court of loyal vassals that served to lead the country to greater prosperity. Graceful Cyrene. Cyrene continued as commander of Frelia's Pegasus Knights. Her grace and beauty in flight were the subject of many songs and paintings, and her popularity soared. Amelia, Rose of the War. Following the war, she returned to Grotto to assist in her country's reconstruction. She surrounded herself with new friends and used the strength she found on the battlefield to live her life in happiness. Dussel, Obsidian General. Following the war, Dussel returned to Grotto, where he was instrumental in its rebuilding. He spent his remaining years watching over Grotto and sharing his wisdom with other nations as an expert combat instructor. Noel, Watcher of Darkness. Noel returned to Grotto, where he dedicated himself to rebuilding it and fulfilling Leon's vision. When the country was restored to its former glory, he disappeared without a trace, never to be seen again. Cormag, Aloof Lanceman. Cormag returned to Grotto to assist in the reconstruction of his country. Shortly after, he left to wander on his own. When he reappeared, he rejoined the army, not as a knight, but as a common soldier. Larakel, Queen of Light. She succeeded her uncle as ruler of the Roustan theocracy several years after the war ended. She never lost her unique perspective on life. She spent much of her rule visiting the neighboring countries. Dazla of the Steady Axe. As Larakel rose to become queen, he remained by her side. Watching Larakel grow to become the queen she was destined to be was Dazla's greatest joy in life. Renak, Rich Merchant. Larakel summoned Renak back to Roustan, and he was forced to return. He was never able to escape his service to the self-centered princess who became queen. Admittedly, he didn't try very hard. Garrick, the Desert Tiger. Garrick continued as a mercenary. Over the years, his reputation grew so great that he had more job offers than he could handle. One day, without warning, he left, never to return. Tethys, Beloved Dancer. She danced from city to city, and the entire continent became her stage. Her fame grew and grew, and large crowds gathered wherever she performed. Ewan, Enthusiastic Student. Ewan continued his studies, modeling his life after the teachings of Sala. Eventually, his education branched off into different paths. His insatiable curiosity led him on a trip to explore the world. Marisa, the Crimson Flash. Marisa became battalion leader for an elite mercenary force. Many men sought to challenge her to a duel, and none of them stood up to her blade. Sala, the Well of Wisdom. Sala returned to Caer Pelin, where he remained a faithful servant of the Manichees. His days were not spent in isolation, though. Many of the friends he met during the War of the Stones came to visit his village. Myr, the Great Dragon. After bidding her farewells to Ephraim, she returned to Darkling Woods. She lived a long and full life, served by the people of Caer Pelin, and comforted by the memories of her dear friends. Ephraim, Restoration King. Busy days awaited him upon his return to Rene's. He oversaw the rebuilding not only of his own country, but also of the entire continent of Magvel. His work was difficult, but his success made him a legend. Erica, Restoration Queen. Erica returned to Rene's and began the reconstruction effort with her brother, Ephraim. Seeing peace return to the lives of her people filled her with happiness. Her smile became a symbol of her people's joy.